Hi everyone, I'm Gautam aka the Seeker of Wisdom. I'm a manifestation coach, and in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about time when it comes to manifestation. Now, before I do so, I'd like to remind you guys I am available for coaching. So I offer hourly, monthly, email, and DM coaching along with premium coaching right now, which is basically unlimited calls and unlimited DMs. I also have two different Facebook groups. I have a free Facebook group where I upload resources from time to time as well as my YouTube videos in advance. And I also have a paid Facebook group where I come up live 4 times a month, answer your queries, and give you guys exclusive resources. And I also have a mailing list where I post articles from time to time as well as my latest offers for coaching. And last but not least, I also have many different masterclasses and bundles and various different coaching options as well. So if you guys are looking for coaching of any kind, feel free to email me or DM me via Instagram, and I'll be more than happy to guide you guys on the pricing options and the payment plans and what plans might be suitable for you. Currently, I am still running my self concept masterclass and my manifest your SP by Valentine's masterclass as well. So those are still up for purchase. So if you guys want any details there, let me know as well. So without further ado, guys, let's get to it. So what prompted this video was I was kind of reflecting on my own journey recently about manifestation, and one thing that I realized was many of my manifestations took some time to come, and I didn't really realize it like up until like recently, because a lot of people have been like talking about this whole time thing. And this kept popping up in the community where everyone is kind of talking about how can I manifest quickly, how can I manifest quickly, right? How can I manifest like this very fast? Yes, I can manifest it, but I want it like now. How can I do that? And people want it within 2 weeks, in days. Now, I'm not saying those are wrong ideologies or those are wrong ways of thinking, but what I am saying is that that puts tremendous amounts of pressure, especially if you are not familiar with the concept of manifesting, if you are new to it, or if you still have trouble persisting in the assumption that your desires are already done. If you have trouble in that, this puts even more pressure. It puts a tremendous amount of pressure, and I would say this is unnecessary, right? This is unnecessary in my opinion. If you ask me, putting pressure in the name of getting things fast isn't fun. And manifesting should ideally feel effortless, it should feel easy, it should feel natural, because the truth of the matter is that we are constantly manifesting 24/7. Now what we are trying to do is consciously manifest. And so regardless of whether or not you try or don't try, it is constantly going on, and what you're trying to do is consciously manifest it. And so you don't have to force things to happen. You don't have to really exert pressure on yourself. And if you are going to want things by a certain time and day and whatnot, that's fine, that's completely fine. But don't put pressure on yourself by being on the lookout in the 3D, thinking how it will happen and things like that. Because if you do that, then that means you are putting pressure on yourself that is completely unnecessary. Most people, when they want something by a certain time, what they tend to do is that they somehow start to think, okay, how is it going to come, when is it going to come, what if it doesn't come? And all these questions kind of hold it back from manifesting it within that specific period of time, when in reality what you could have done is just simply assume that you already have your desires, and you could have had it like even way earlier than the time that you have set. So that's the advantage of not putting a certain timestamp on things. If I were you, I wouldn't even bother about time. But the question is, well, if it takes a while, then how do I deal with that? How do I persist? How do I deal with this whole time factor? So what I would do is simply aim to feel my desires as real as possible. That's what I would be doing. And even in many of my desires, as I said, I was reflecting on a lot of my experiences. For example, becoming a YouTuber. I started like, putting out videos specifically in June 2020. That's when, the whole George Floyd protests was happening, and I had this urge to really put out something out there. And if you remember, like if you're on my Instagram, like you would have seen that video. Like it was like I think I kind of archived it at this point because it was very relevant. But if you scroll back, like way back, like that's how I started on Instagram, right? I had my page since 2018, so that's a whole nother story. But when I started to put out videos, I wanted to be a YouTuber. When this was in 2020, But what many people didn't realize is that I didn't have this channel, the Secret of Wisdom YouTube channel, until say like November 2021, I think, or December 2021. So you can see like how long it took. Now it you can ask, like, well, what kind of stopped you from starting a channel? It wasn't as simple as like, well, I'm gonna quickly start a channel, right? Because I once, there was this whole thing about IGTV being monetized at that point, and people were talking about YouTube being a very competitive landscape. I had my own set of limiting beliefs back then, but I was working through it. But the main thing is that I kept my vision, like, I saw myself doing videos, I saw myself putting content out there, and I saw myself connecting with folks from all around the world. And it all started with that one video. I didn't, see how it was all going to pan out. I trusted the process, but I took the first step. Like, I just intended for the best and just assumed, and then just went with the flow. Whatever I felt like doing, I did it. As Neville says, free will ends in the mind. Meaning, whatever you do or you don't do, you're going to get your desires, assuming that you are feeling your desires as though it's already done. If you are dwelling in the end state of mind, irregardless of your actions, you are going to get your manifestations. So all you really have to do, your sole job, your sole purpose, is to simply dwell in the end state of mind, is to simply persist in the truth that your desires are done. That your SP is already your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, for example, that you already have the $1,000,000 you want, that you already are the wealthy person that you are, and things like that, right? So you just have to persist in those types of truths based on your desires, of course. And if you can just do that, regardless of your actions, you will get whatever you want, right? So you don't have to worry about the time. And sure, it might take a while, and don't let that like take you out of the manifestation process. One thing I've noticed is that if something doesn't come by maybe a month, or even 2 or even 3 months, people automatically kind of revert back to the idea that they are failing. And when I look at some of my desires, as I said with the YouTube, it took more than a year. It took more than a year. And I didn't see it as, okay, I'm failing in my manifestations or whatsoever. I just said, you know what, I'm going to trust this process. Things are going to happen on its own. And there's going to be a point where I am going to be putting out stuff, and I am going to be, having fun with it. And I just imagine that, like, what does the life of a YouTuber looks like? And I just kind of persisted in that. And, things just rolled and it just panned out for me. I remember when I wanted to even like make videos for IGTV, that process was so smooth, it just happened within like days. But that desire to be putting out content was always there for me for a long time before it all happened. But did I, when that happened, did I consider myself as a failure? No. Just because of the fact that it took long doesn't mean I failed in that manifestation. Sure, it took some time, and that doesn't mean anything, right? What does Neville say? If it takes long, then wait. If it be long, then wait, right? That's what he always says. For it is sure not to be late. Everything, like according to Neville, has its own timing, right? And whether or not you believe in divine timing, it's up to you. And I don't necessarily believe in it per se, but I do believe in that, like, when it comes, it will come. Like, it is a promise. Like, God shall not be mocked. Like, whenever you want something, right, it has to come to you. You just have to, persist in the assumption that it already is yours. And so just like, fantasize about it, think about it. Like, what does that look like? What does it mean for you? And really persist in that, right? If you are, manifesting your SP, right? Just think about what does it feel like to be in a life with them, to be, in love with them, right? To be waking up to the face of your loved one every single day. What does that feel like? Try to feel it real, right? Because doing so collapses the time. Now, when I look back at my journey, was there some things that I would have done differently in retrospect? Absolutely. That could have potentially, cut down the timing. But do I let that get to me? Do I let that, make me see myself as like a failure? Absolutely not. Even a lot of other things too, took me more than a year at times, right? Because one, I was kind of like getting clear on my vision, because I was going kind of back and forth. So that also kind of sometimes factors into play and things like that. And there's also the other thing of persisting as well, because sometimes when 3D kind of shows up, it might be hard for you to really like take your mind off of 3D and really just focus on what you want. So that kind of plays a factor into it. But just because sometimes it takes a while to kind of get a hang of it, and I'll be the first one to admit it, right? And with you, with your SP or with money, things may take a while for you to get the hang of it, because like feeling it real, looking past 3D, these are skills that one needs to master. It's not something that you are inbuilt with, right? You can imagine effortlessly, but to persist takes a little bit of practice, right? So give yourself that time, be patient, right? Don't be on the rush, and certainly don't like let life pass by you. What I mean is, don't be so focused on manifesting that you forgot to live life, because a lot of people tend to do that, and they feel all the more frustrated if they're not getting results, especially like 6 months into their manifestation, 7 months in, a year in, a 2 years in even, and for these people, one thing I'll definitely say is this: take a step back, enjoy your life, enjoy the process, right? Keep your eyes on the prize, right? Like persist in the end state of mind as much as possible, but don't put your life on hold, right? Go out, like have fun with your friends, pursue your hobbies, pursue your craft, your trade, whatever that is, invest in yourself, and make it like, and the SP, or any desire for that matter, make it a part of your life rather than making it your entire life. So these are the ways that I would really kind of deal with the whole time factor. Now, are there ways to collapse it? As I said earlier, there are, right? So, looking past 3D, not wondering about the how, and just simply assuming that it's already done. And like, in your mind, you kind of like speak to yourself as though it's already done, and, giving gratitude for it and things like that. But these things takes time to master. So be patient with yourself, right? If something doesn't happen within a week or two, or even a month, or even 3 months, 4 months, don't freak out, right? Don't automatically scour through Reddit pages or forums, or don't like change your techniques even, right? I mean, definitely assess yourself, right? And definitely look into whether or not you are feeling it real with the help of your techniques and everything. But don't like constantly be changing techniques all the time, because that's one thing I see is that like folks tend to change their techniques all the time, because they want that quick fix. Manifestation is not a quick fix. Let me just tell you that first. It is not a quick fix, right? You do create your desires, you do create the life you want with this, but it is not a quick fix. There are things that you still may need to address, right? There are things that you still may need to look into and deal with, right? And oftentimes these are internal work. I'm not saying these are prerequisites, but if it is in your way of you assuming your desires to be real, then you may have to work on those. Again, these are not prerequisites, but if it's in your way of you assuming your desires to be real, then you have to work on those, right? So for example, if you and like your SP want to live together, right? But you are still like dwelling in the fact that maybe your SP said no to you for living together, or you are just thinking about the money, and you just don't feel that you have enough money to get the house, or to kind of pay your share, for example, or whatever it is, right? If you don't think that you are worthy of having love, or any of that kind of like limiting beliefs, if those kind of assumptions are in direct conflict to you being with your SP in the your dream house or whatsoever, the thing is, what will happen is that unless and if you like tackle that assumption, you're never going to get your desires. Why? Because this assumption is preventing you from realizing or recognizing your desires to be true. So again, if it is in the way of your end desire, then definitely work on addressing it and whatsoever. Like, I think that's completely fine. So if I were you, that's what I would work on. And definitely be patient. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And you don't have to compare yourself and beat yourself up with like based on what you see on Facebook groups or Reddit forums. I often see people doing that to themselves, and I often think, well, why? Because I've never really like to be honest with you guys, it's only when my clients kind of send me like Reddit articles was when I was first exposed to manifestation related content in Reddit, because I don't bother scrolling through stuff. Like, ignorance is bliss, honestly speaking. Streamline it for yourself, right? It's you, your desires, and your higher self. That's it, right? What are you doing? You are telling your higher self, okay, this is what I want, and I'm going to assume it to be true. Now it's up to you to bring it to me. What am I going to do in the meantime? I'm going to chill in my life. I'm going to do whatever I have to in the 3D and just go by life, take it day one day at a time. And I'm going to assume that my desire is already done. Now it's up to you, right? The higher self to bring in that to me. The higher self is like, okay, cool, and it's going to bring it to you. That's it, right? So don't think about anything except your desires as much as possible. I was talking to a friend recently, and one thing she brought up was really interesting, and that kind of like resonated with me as well. Is that ideally speaking, she said, I want to be speaking as though my end desires are already done as much as possible. And she was like, I don't know how you do it, like what's your process. But I was like, she was like, I need to always speak as though my end desires are always true and realized. And I was like, you know what, that is so true. Ideally speaking, that's what you ought to be doing, right? If something is preventing you from doing so, definitely work on it. This is where techniques come in to help you speak as though your desires are already true. And this is where the techniques like inner dialogues, inner conversations, affirmations, or even visualizations all come into play, right? So again, use whatever tools you need to get that assumption ingrained in your mind, that as though your desires are already done. And if you can do that, then it'll all come to you effortlessly, right? Everything will just come to you, right? It may take a bit of time, right? Granted, like everything comes in its own way. The bridge of incidents unfolds in its own way and everything. And obviously you can set the rule that you manifest things quickly and easily. But again, don't let anything pressure you, right? Let things come to you. Let things come to you. Let things flow and enjoy your life. Don't put it on hold. And certainly don't be on the lookout, right? The moment you start looking out, you're focusing, you're being taken out of your end state, and you're focusing on the lack thereof. By looking out for your desires, you are basically in the state of mind of lack, right? Because otherwise, why would you be on the lookout? So you have to tackle these types of things in the meantime, and you will be fine, right? It may take a while, but it won't take forever. And some desire, and assuming that like you are like that you're feeling that your desires are real, right? If you can just do that, that's in direct proportion to how quick it comes as well. So there's that aspect, right? So again, it might not take just a day or two. In some cases it does, but if it doesn't, again, don't freak out. You're going to be fine, right? Just enjoy your life in the meantime. And just like, people always freak out if it takes like 3 months, and I'm like, 90 days is nothing in the face of like the long run, right? Think macro, right? And so just go with the flow, right? Don't be constantly be taken out of the end state of mind by focusing on the 3D, by focusing on Reddit forums and Facebook groups, and comparing yourself with others and things like that, right? If you saw my podcast with Wendell, he was also saying this, like when someone shares their success story on a Facebook group, right? And I've seen this even with my own Facebook group as well. Like, one thing that people tend to ask is, but what were your affirmations? Like, as though that's like the secret ingredient to manifesting it quickly. Like, I'm sorry, but no, right? It is simply just assuming your desires to be true is what's going to help you manifest your desires. And if you can just do that, everything else will be fine. So again, just go with the flow, right? Assume your desires to be real as possible, and just maintain that assumption. Everything else will come to you, right? If it takes a while, then wait, right? And if you really need something by a certain time, then simply assume it to be true, and don't second guess yourself. That's the main thing. Don't second guess yourself, right? If you are going to manifest within a time, you need to have a high level of conviction, right? If you are kind of working on that high level of conviction, it's okay, take your time, right? What's the hurry? What's the rush? Like, just chill, right? Because I see people just unnecessarily stressing themselves out. Like, it's really kind of heartbreaking sometimes to see, if I'm really being honest, because these people, and they are not just like, like in their 20s or anything like that. I'm talking like people in their 30s and 40s, kind of like just feeling that whole pressure on themselves. And I'm like, like, just relax. Like, you don't deserve to put so much pressure on yourself. You can't afford to do that anymore, right? Life's too short to be putting that much of pressure on yourselves, right? Just go out there and enjoy, just take it one day at a time, right? Simplify the process for yourself, right? There's so much more to life than just your desires. As much as you may think otherwise at the moment, that is the truth. And so just take it one day at a time, just enjoy your life, right? And make your desire an aspect of your life. That it's like, it's coming, right? Like it's coming to you, right? In the meantime, are you just gonna sit around and do nothing? Absolutely no. You're gonna enjoy your life. You're gonna make the most out of it. And before you know it, it's gonna be there. Like for me, when I look back at my desires, I was like, oh, right, like this there was a time that this used to be a desire of mine. And here I am, right? This phone I'm using to record this video, this podcast, equipment. It's funny with this podcast equipment, I was just like looking through some archives for something else. And there was this design I did for like a potential podcast 2 years ago. And so in that, there's a silhouette of a boom arm and a mic and things like that. So I was trying to like design a thumbnail. And here we are 2 years later. So one of the reasons why it took 2 years was because I didn't know what to talk about. And again, I didn't have the equipment. I didn't know what equipment to buy. And I didn't even have a phone to record properly at that time. So there was a lot of things. But I remember, I think like I was talking to my friend about it 2 years ago. And I even came up with the name Enlightening Tangent like as early as 2 years ago, right? And every time when I saw like Joe Rogan's podcast or something like that, I was like, you know what? I can't wait to start my podcast. Like I'm gonna do something like that. And I was just kind of like letting the idea kind of marinate. And before I knew it, like circumstances just happened in such a way that you know. I was like, okay, you know what? I think this is the time to start. I think I have a sizable audience at the moment, and I was like, I'm gonna go with it because now feels right for me. And you know, within like a matter of like weeks, I sorted out the equipment. And the first thing I did before I started the podcast was to tell my friend, right? Like the one who I was kind of brainstorming this idea with. I was like, hey, remember that idea we were talking about 2 years ago? Like I did it finally. And just because it took 2 years to come to fruition, does that mean I consider that a failure? No, absolutely not. Right. Again, there was just a lot of things. Like 2 years ago, I was in a completely different place, and I was just taking it one step at a time. I was like, okay, I'm gonna let things flow to me organically. Now, I'm not saying that desires will take a year or two. Absolutely not. But what I am saying is that if it does, then allow it to come that way. Like just be patient, right? That's one thing. That's that. But the other thing is also, again, use the like techniques to shorten the time by persisting in it as much as possible and by not entertaining any other situation but the best case, right? One of the reasons possibly this podcast took probably like 2 years to make was because of the fact that I wasn't like maybe too seriously focusing on those. Like it was a desire that was out there. And I just let things happen organically, like I said. So I wasn't like putting my 100% focus on it. But if I did, it probably would have happened sooner, right? And I'll be the first one to admit it. But even then, like, does that mean that if it came much later, that it is not A, my manifestation, or B, I'm a failure? Absolutely no, right? It is still my manifestation, and no, I am still a success, right? And that's what I always like will tell people is like just because something might take a while or something just doesn't show up the moment you wanted it or something, it doesn't reflect anything on you. Just keep going, invest in yourself, work on it. And use everything. There are so many tools that we have to our disposal. And I think there was one point, one of my clients, this was a long time ago, someone brought this point up to me about how the folks who attended like Neville's lectures back in the day, think about it, like they didn't have access to YouTube and stuff like that, right? They came like what, once a week to Neville's lectures and heard him talk, and then they went back and they started applying, and then they will come back and maybe clarify doubts and stuff like that, right? So this means that they didn't have access to him or any of his, they can't just like rewind something and just see and like play back and things like that, right? And yet the success stories that came out during that time in the 50s and 60s, through Neville's lectures, right? The lady who got like $2,500 for the rest of her natural life, for example, those kinds of wonderful stories, like those were still possible because those people rather than like consuming content all the time, they applied it as well. They applied it with due diligence. I'm not saying many of you aren't doing so or anything like that, but I'm saying, like, instead of being too focused on, like, watching videos, or focusing on what type of approach I should use to get it in the shortest possible time, rather than coming at it from that approach, come at it from the perspective that, okay, what can I do to feel it as real as possible, and what can I do to persist in that assumption, what can I do to maintain that end state. If you make this your priority, things will flow for you very quickly, right? Again, it might take a little bit of practice, that's fine, right? Ask yourself, like, whenever you're feeling that pressure for time, one thing I asked myself was, on whose timeline am I going here, right? Like, on whose timeline am I judging myself by, right? Like, by 25 you should have XYZ. On whose time zone, on whose timeline, sorry, not time zone, timeline, right? On whose timeline am I judging myself by? Because I see a lot of my friends, in their kind of like late 20s or 30s and things like that. They're like, oh, I should be married by now, I should be like XYZ by now, and things like that. And I'm like, on whose timeline though? On whose timeline exactly are you judging yourself? And it's so easy to put pressure on yourself by comparing, right? Whatever happened in your past, it's fine, right? Circumstances do not matter. Now you have a chance to create the life that you want. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit down and compare yourself even more and continue this cycle, or are you going to break this cycle by simply assuming what you want and persisting in that until it shows up in your reality? The choice is yours. Guys, we have come to this end of this video. If this video resonated with you, be sure to drop a like and a comment down below. Turn on your bell notification so that you guys will know when I upload a new video every single week. We are still doing that giveaway for 1,000 subscribers. So I'll be giving away 1 week of DM coaching for one lucky person. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram at The Seeker of Wisdom without any spaces, and you're automatically entered, and I'll be announcing a winner when we reach 1,000 subscribers. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and happy manifesting.